do you think it's a rational consolidation that is happening or the restructuring? How do you foresee 2026 to be as we enter into a new phase where AI-driven marketing and e-commerce ecosystem is growing at a very large speed?
That 300 billion I mentioned, which is declining, is basically what the holding companies are scrapping over. The problem that they face is it's an old model, a multi-brand model, maybe we can talk about that has been sort of outdistanced, outmaneuvered by what's happening in a digital world. But the roots of their revenues are really in that 300 billion, which is under pressure, not in the 700 billion, which is growing. Publicis and maybe to a lesser extent Havas probably are prospering better or doing better, growing their revenues, not hugely, but slightly, because they have more exposure to digital and data and probably have better strategies worked out. Maybe there's something in the Parisian water as well that makes them better, but they have fared better. The other four, including IPG, which is now part of Omnicom, now reduced to three, along with Dentsu and WPP, remain under huge pressure because probably 35, 40, 45% of their revenues still come from that 300 billion that is under huge pressure. So I think you have to make a distinction between the two. The problem in the digital side is the platforms are growing, as I say, by 10, 15 or 20%, but those platforms are starting to invest more and more heavily in capital expenditure around data and energy and AI capacity. So they're spending probably this year or next year well over $500 billion between the hyperscalers, the so-called hyperscaler platforms, are spending well over $500 billion. I think the latest forecast for next year is about $530 billion on CapEx around AI expansion, around data centers, and around energy. So they're making huge investments in those areas. I mean, what's really interesting is you have two companies now which are valued at about $25 billion. You have Publicis at around that level, and you have Omnicom around that level. You then drop down to Dentsu at around 6 or 7 billion, and WPP at 4, and then Havas at 1.5. So you've got a huge difference between that sort of duopoly there of Publicis and Omnicom, both at $25 billion each. And then you drop down to Dentsu at 6 or 7. So there's a huge difference. Now, what the market's signaling, and when you look at the relative sizes of Dentsu and indeed WPP, is the market is saying either Publicis and Omnicom are overvalued, doubtful, because the multiples appear to be quite cheap, or the other assets are undervalued. So Dentsu International probably undervalued, WPP probably undervalued, but the question is whether anybody has the courage to leap in at that scale and make that investment with that complexity and with the shadow or cloud of AI and its implications for the organization.